I woke up with a skull-splitting headache in a bed that wasn't mine, wearing pink silk pajamas I'd never seen before, with a diamond ring on my left hand that could probably pay off my student loans 3 times over. Panic slammed into me like a freight train. I bolted upright too fast, the room tilted dangerously, and I had to grip the sheets to keep from passing out. Egyptian cotton sheets. Nothing like the worn Target bedding in my studio apartment, back in a life that suddenly felt like it belonged to someone else. Before we dive deeper into this story, make sure to subscribe. New stories unfold here every day, and trust me, you won't want to miss a single one. And don't forget to comment which state you're watching from. I love seeing where everyone's tuning in. Let's begin. I tried to remember last night, Maya's bachelorette party in Vegas, shots at some club with neon lights that hurt my eyes, a dare from one of the bridesmaids. Something about dancing with strangers, more shots that tasted like bad decisions, and then nothing, a complete black hole where the last 10 hours of my life should be. The ring caught the sunlight streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows, emerald-cut diamond, at least 5 carats. Maybe more, flawless clarity set in platinum, with smaller diamonds circling the band like a constellation. This wasn't some drunk impulse buy from a Vegas pawn shop. This was the kind of ring that came with security guards and insurance policies and belonged on the hand of someone who mattered, someone with money and power and connections, not on the finger of Selena Ruiz, freelance graphic designer with maxed out credit cards and an eviction notice sitting on her kitchen counter. Back in her real life, the bedroom was terrifying in its luxury, massive space, maybe twice the size of my entire apartment, with windows overlooking the Las Vegas Strip, in full daylight glory furniture that looked like it cost more than my car, sleek, modern, minimalist, expensive art on the walls that I recognized from design magazines, a Rothko maybe or something. Equally prestigious. This wasn't a hotel room. Hotels had generic art and minibars, and those little cards about housekeeping schedules. This was someone's home, someone very, very wealthy, someone who had enough power to orchestrate whatever nightmare I'd stumbled into. I stumbled out of bed, my legs shaky, my mouth tasting like expensive champagne mixed with regret and terror. Where were my clothes, the red cocktail dress I'd borrowed from Maya because I couldn't afford anything nice enough for Vegas, my cheap heels that gave me blisters, my clutch with my phone inside? I spotted the dress draped carefully over a leather chair that probably cost more than 3 months of my rent. My phone sitting on a marble nightstand beside a glass of water and 2 aspirin, arranged like someone knew exactly how terrible I'd feel when I woke up. That thought made ice run down my spine. Someone had undressed me. Someone had put me in these pajamas. Someone had been in this room while I was unconscious and vulnerable. I grabbed my phone, desperately pressed the power button. Nothing completely dead. Obviously, I was trapped in a stranger's penthouse with no memory, no way to call for help, and a ring on my finger that suggested I'd done something catastrophically stupid. I tried the door, expecting it to be locked, expecting to be a prisoner, but it opened smoothly, silently, like everything in this place was designed to work perfectly. The hallway beyond was even more intimidating. Marble floors, artwork that belonged in museums, recessed lighting that probably cost more than my college education. And at the end of the hallway, standing backlit by a wall of windows overlooking the city was. And at the end of the hallway, standing backlit by a wall of windows overlooking the city, was him. But I'm getting ahead of myself. To understand how Selena Ruiz, broke, ordinary, invisible, became the wife of the most dangerous man in Nevada, you need to understand 3 things: desperation, manipulation, and the kind of contract that changes everything. The moment Easton left, I tore through the penthouse like a woman possessed, searching for my phone, my lifeline, my only connection to reality. I found it in the kitchen of all places, plugged into a charger sitting on a marble counter beside a note written in sharp, precise handwriting. "You'll need this fully charged." No signature, no explanation, just another reminder that he controlled everything, even my ability to call for help. I grabbed the phone, my hands shaking so badly I almost dropped it, and collapsed onto one of the leather bar stools that probably cost more than my rent. The screen lit up. 47 missed calls from Maya. 89 text messages. a voicemail from my landlord about the eviction, and 3 missed calls from my mother. I ignored all of it and opened Google with fingers that wouldn't stop trembling. Easton Horton. I typed the name, feeling like I was summoning a demon. The results loaded and my stomach dropped. The first hit was a Forbes article. Easton Horton takes control of family empire after father's death, with a photo of him in a perfectly tailored suit, standing in front of one of the biggest casinos on the Strip. No smile, just that same cold, controlled expression he'd worn while threatening me this morning. I clicked the article, scanned it, my horror growing with every sentence. Youngest son of crime boss, Vincent Horton assumes leadership of the family's extensive casino real estate and hospitality holdings following his father's death from a heart attack 6 months ago. Sources close to the family suggest succession was contentious, with Easton's brother Marcus and sister Vivian both vying for control. The late Vincent Horton's will reportedly included unusual stipulations regarding marriage and legitimate heirs. Marriage stipulations that explained everything. I searched deeper, found a New York Times piece about organized crime in Nevada that mentioned the Horton family by name. One of the most powerful criminal organizations in the western United States, controlling everything from casino operations to political influence to underground gambling and protection rackets. There was a photo of Easton at some charity gala, standing alone in a crowd of people, looking like an apex predator surrounded by prey. More articles, more photos, always the same, always alone, always controlled. I found mentions of violence, of rivals who disappeared, of investigations that went nowhere, of police who looked the other way. There were rumors, speculation, whispers about the real source of the Horton fortune, and none of it involved anything legal or safe or sane. I'd married a mafia boss. Not just wealthy, not just powerful, but actually dangerous. Actually criminal. Actually capable of making people disappear permanently, just like he'd promised. My phone slipped from my hands, clattered on the marble counter. I made it to the bathroom, just in time to throw up everything in my stomach, which wasn't much. Just champagne and bile and the taste of my own stupidity. When I finally stopped shaking, I found the contract right where Easton had left it, that thick leather folder sitting on the bed, like a bomb. I carried it back to the kitchen, spread it out on the counter, and started reading. 12 months, it said right at the top. 12 months of pretending to be his wife in exchange for $250,000 and a clean divorce at the end. The terms were laid out in brutal, legal detail. Public appearances as needed, including but not limited to charity events, family gatherings, business functions, political fundraisers. I would be expected to play the role of loving, devoted wife, to smile for cameras, to attend events on his arm, to convince the world this marriage was real. Separate bedrooms. I was guaranteed my own space, my own privacy. The contract explicitly stated no expectation of physical intimacy beyond what is required for public appearances, which should have been reassuring, but somehow made the whole thing feel even more transactional, even more cold. No questions about business operations. The contract made it abundantly clear that I was not to ask about his work, his schedule, his associates, his activities. If I saw something, I was to forget it. If I heard something, I was to pretend I hadn't. Violation of this clause would result in immediate termination of the agreement and legal consequences. No contact with police, press, or any law enforcement or media entities without explicit written permission. Violation would be considered breach of contract and result in penalties, including but not limited to forfeiture of all payment and potential legal action for defamation. The payment schedule was straightforward: monthly stipend of $5,000 for living expenses. Full payment of $250,000 upon successful completion of 12-month term. Early termination by either party would result in forfeiture of payment unless both parties agreed otherwise. The breach consequences were outlined in excruciating detail. Legal fees that would bankrupt me. Credit destruction that would follow me for life. Professional blacklisting that would make it impossible to work in my field. They'd thought of everything. Every possible escape route. Every potential betrayal. There was even a marriage counseling clause. If either party felt the arrangement was failing to meet contract terms, we would attend mediated sessions with a counselor of Easton's, choosing to maintain the appearance of a genuine relationship. Social media guidelines: what I could post, what I couldn't mention. How to present our relationship online. Even my digital life would be controlled, curated, performed. I read it twice, then a third time, looking for loopholes, for escape routes, for any way out that didn't involve either playing along or being destroyed. There was nothing. The contract was airtight, brutal, efficient, just like the man who'd written it. This wasn't a spur-of-the-moment decision. This wasn't some drunken impulse. This was meticulously planned, carefully executed, perfectly designed to trap me. Easton Horton had needed a wife to secure his inheritance, and he'd found the perfect target. Someone desperate enough, someone vulnerable enough, someone with no resources to fight back. I thought about fighting anyway, calling Maya, calling a lawyer, calling the police, trying to get the marriage annulled on grounds of intoxication or fraud or coercion. But every article I'd read, every search result I'd found told me the same thing: the Hortons owned half the lawyers in Vegas. The police looked the other way. The courts would rule in his favor, because they always did for men with money and power and connections. My other option was compliance. 12 months of playing dress-up and smiling for cameras in exchange for enough money to change my life. $250,000 would pay off my debt fund, my design business, give me the security I'd never had, the security my mother never had, watching her work 3 jobs and still struggle to keep the lights on. I remembered being 12 years old, watching my mother cry over bills, promising myself I would never be trapped like that, never be dependent, never be powerless. And here I was, faced with the exact choice she'd faced over and over again: survive or maintain your pride. 24 hours exactly after Easton had walked out the door, he walked back in. I was still sitting at the kitchen counter. The contract spread in front of me, my phone abandoned beside it. I'd been staring at the signature line for the past hour. "Have you decided, Selena?" he asked, his voice calm, controlled, like this was a business meeting, like my entire life wasn't hanging in the balance. I looked up at him, at this dangerous, beautiful, terrifying man who'd orchestrated everything, who'd trapped me, who held all the power, and I thought about my maxed-out credit cards, my eviction notice, my mother's voice on that last voicemail, asking if I needed money she didn't have. I picked up the pen he'd left beside the contract. My hand shook so badly I could barely write, but I signed my name, Selena Ruiz, on the line that would make this nightmare official, that would bind me to him for 12 months, that would sell my freedom for the promise of security. For the first time since I'd met him, Easton smiled. It wasn't warm or kind or reassuring. It was cold and victorious and absolute, the smile of a man who'd gotten exactly what he wanted, exactly when he wanted it. "Welcome to the family, Mrs. Horton," he said, and somehow those words sounded less like a greeting and more like a life sentence. The penthouse became my prison within an hour of signing that contract. Easton gave me a tour, speaking in that same calm, controlled voice, like he was showing me a hotel suite, instead of the cage I'd be living in for the next 12 months. "Your wing is on the east side," he said, gesturing down a hallway that seemed to stretch forever. "Bedroom, bathroom, walk-in closet. And I had a design studio set up for you per the contract terms. You'll have everything you need to continue your work." The studio should have felt like a gift: top-of-the-line equipment, a drafting table, positioned perfectly to catch the morning light. Software subscriptions I could never afford on my own, but it felt like a bribe, like he was trying to make this gilded cage comfortable enough that I'd forget I couldn't leave Rosa Handel's housekeeping. Easton continued as an older woman with kind eyes and graying hair appeared from somewhere I hadn't noticed. "She'll prepare meals, do laundry, anything you need. Marcus is your driver." A younger man with military bearing and cold eyes nodded from near the elevator. "You're not to go anywhere without him. Security is stationed throughout the building. You won't see them, but they're always there. Always watching, always monitoring, always making sure I didn't run." "What are the rules?" I asked, my voice sharper than I intended, since I'm apparently living in a maximum security resort. Easton's eyes flickered with something that might have been amusement. Curfew is midnight unless you're with me. All destinations must be approved in advance. No contact with anyone I haven't vetted. No social media posts without clearance. Rosa will provide you with appropriate clothing for public appearances. You're representing the Horton family. Now, appearance matters. So, I'm your prisoner, I said, crossing my arms, the defiance rising in my chest like bile. No, he stepped closer, his presence overwhelming in the massive space. You're my wife, there's a difference. Prisoners don't get paid $250,000, and prisoners don't get their own wing of a penthouse, and prisoners definitely don't get to walk away after 12 months. You signed a contract, Selena. I suggest you honor it. The way he said my name sent ice down my spine, not threatening exactly, but absolute, like he owned it now, like he owned me. 3 days later, I understood exactly what being Easton Horton's wife actually meant. The charity gala was being held at the Corinthian, one of the Horton family's flagship casinos, all marble and gold and crystal chandeliers that probably cost more than most people's houses a stylist. Rosa had sent arrived at noon with a garment bag containing a dress I would never have been able to afford. Deep emerald green silk that clung to every curve with a neckline that was just this side of appropriate. She did my makeup. My hair left me looking like someone who belonged on Easton's arm, like someone who mattered. When I emerged from my wing, Easton was waiting in the living room wearing a black suit that probably cost more than my car. He looked at me for a long moment, his expression unreadable, then nodded once. Perfect. You look exactly like what you are. And what's that? I asked, even though I wasn't sure I wanted the answer. Mine. The casino was packed with Vegas elite politicians in expensive suits, businessmen whose fortunes came from questionable sources, women dripping in diamonds and designer labels, everyone important, everyone powerful, everyone dangerous. Easton's hand found the small of my back, possessive, proprietary, guiding me through the crowd while cameras flashed and people stared. Smile, he murmured in my ear, his breath warm against my skin. You're madly in love with me, remember? I smiled. It felt like my face might crack. He introduced me to dozens of people, their names and titles blurring together. Mayor, someone. City council, someone else. Casino, owner. Real estate developer, hotel magnate. All of them looking at me with varying degrees of curiosity, calculation, assessment, like they were trying to figure out what game Easton was playing and whether I was a pawn or a queen. Easton. A smooth voice cut through the crowd, and I turned to see a man approaching mid-40s, expensive suit, shark smile. Congratulations on your marriage. I had no idea you were even seeing anyone. Something shifted in Easton's posture, subtle but unmistakable. The temperature around us dropped 10 degrees. Castellano, he said, the name sounding like a curse. Thank you, though I don't recall inviting you. Public event. Castellano's smile widened as his eyes slid to me. And I wanted to meet your beautiful bride, Selena. Is it such a pretty name for such a pretty girl? The way he said it made my skin crawl, not quite threatening, but close, like he was testing boundaries, seeing how far he could push. Easton's hand tightened on my waist. My wife, he corrected, his voice dropping into something cold and lethal, something that made several nearby conversations stop. Is off limits. I thought I made that clear to everyone in this city. Of course. Castellano held up his hands in mock surrender, but his eyes stayed on me, calculating dangerous, just offering congratulations. After all, marriage is such a delicate thing. So many ways it can go wrong. Accidents happen, you understand. The threat hung in the air, barely disguised. Easton moved so fast I barely saw it. One moment. He was beside me, the next. He was in Castellano's space, his voice low and deadly. If anything happens to her, if she so much as gets a paper cut that traces back to you, I will end you. I will end your family. I will burn everything you've ever built to ash and salt the earth where it stood. Do we understand each other? Castellano's smile faltered. Crystal clear. Good. Now get the fuck out of my casino. I watched Castellano retreat, his shark smile gone, replaced by something that looked like fear, and I realized with dawning horror that everything I'd read about Easton wasn't exaggeration, wasn't media, sensationalism. He really was that dangerous, that ruthless, that absolutely terrifying. When someone threatened what was his, and I was his now, whether I wanted to be or not. 2 days after the gala, Easton found me in the design studio where I'd been hiding, trying to focus on work, trying to pretend my life was normal. "Family dinner this Friday," he announced without preamble. "My brother Marcus, my sister Vivian, my uncle Lorenzo, they want to meet you." "Can I say no?" I asked, already knowing the answer. "No, they'll try to break you," he said, leaning against the doorframe, arms crossed. "They'll test you, insult you, try to find your weaknesses. Don't let them show strength. They respect nothing else." I spent the next 3 days researching the Horton family. Marcus the enforcer, known for his temper and his fists, arrested twice for assault, both times, charges mysteriously dropped. Vivian, the strategist. Harvard Business School, ran the legitimate side of the family operations, known for destroying competitors with legal precision. Uncle Lorenzo, the patriarch, semi-retired, but still influential, still respected, still feared, the man who'd built the empire that Easton now controlled. Why marriage? I asked the night before the dinner, finding Easton in his office reviewing contracts. "Why did your father's will require it?" He looked up at me for a long moment, like he was deciding whether to answer. "My father believed family was everything, that a man without a wife, without the possibility of heirs, was a man who could be controlled because he had nothing to protect, nothing to lose. He wanted to make sure whoever inherited his empire had stakes in the future, had something worth protecting. So I'm your stake." Yes. He didn't sugarcoat it, didn't try to make it sound better. "My father's will splits control 3 ways between Marcus, Vivian, and myself, but only if we meet certain conditions. Marcus had to prove his loyalty through violence, Vivian had to prove her intelligence through business expansion, and I had to prove my commitment through marriage. Without you, I lose everything. The casino, the real estate, the legitimate operations, all of it. And your siblings want you to fail. They want control, and they'll do anything to get it, including coming after you." He stood, walked around the desk until he was standing in front of me, close enough that I had to tilt my head back to meet his eyes. "They'll come for you because you're my weakness now, the only thing I can't afford to lose. Do you understand?" I understood. I understood that I wasn't just playing a role. I was a target, that this contract had painted a bullseye on my back, that every enemy Easton had would see me as leverage, as a way to hurt him. "I won't let them touch you," he said softly. One hand coming up to cup my face, the gesture so unexpected, so gentle that I froze. "Whatever else happens, whatever you think of me, I keep what's mine, safe." After he left, I went back to the studio, picked up my sketch pad, and found myself drawing his face from memory, trying to capture that contradiction. The cold, ruthless mafia boss who'd trapped me, and the man who'd just promised to protect me with something that looked almost like fear in his eyes. Trying to understand which one was real, and terrified that the answer might be both. The morning of the family dinner, Easton appeared in my studio doorway with coffee and a look that told me this briefing was mandatory. "We need to talk about tonight," he said, setting the cup on my desk. "About what you say, what you don't say, and how you survive the next 3 hours." I set down my stylus, gave him my full attention because the tension in his shoulders told me this mattered. "Your Uncle Lorenzo runs the family even in retirement. Everyone defers to him. He's sharp, observant. He'll be measuring your worth from the moment you walk in. Don't lie to him. He can smell deception like blood in water." Comforting. "Marcus will try to intimidate you. He's a blunt instrument. All rage and violence. He'll question your background, your motives, whether you're worthy of the Horton name. Don't back down from him. Bullies respect strength and nothing else. And Vivian is the dangerous one." Easton's jaw tightened. "She's subtle, brilliant, vicious. She'll smile while she cuts you apart piece by piece. She'll find your weaknesses and exploit them without you even realizing it's happening." So basically, I'm walking into a room full of people who want to destroy me. Yes, but here's the thing. He stepped closer, his eyes intense. They expect you to be weak, expect you to be some terrified gold digger. I picked up in a moment of desperation. They expect you to break, so don't be yourself. The smart, sharp woman who told me off in this penthouse, the woman who signed a contract with a mafia boss and didn't flinch, show them that and you might survive this. The drive to the estate took 40 minutes through neighborhoods that got progressively more expensive until we turned onto a private road lined with trees that probably cost more than houses. The mansion appeared like something from a movie. Old money architecture mixed with new money, excess marble columns, manicured gardens, fountains, and what looked like actual statuary. Easton's hand found mine in the back seat, his grip firm, grounding. "Don't let them see fear," he said quietly. "The moment they smell weakness, it's over." "No pressure then." His mouth almost smiled, almost, "You've got this." The entrance hall was intimidating, all imported marble and crystal chandeliers and artwork that belonged in museums. A staff member wordlessly led us to a formal dining room, where 3 people were already seated, waiting, watching as we entered. Uncle Lorenzo sat at the head of the table, elderly but sharp-eyed, with the kind of presence that commanded rooms without effort. He looked at me the way someone might examine a racehorse assessing value potential flaws. Marcus was exactly what Easton had described. Broad-shouldered, heavily tattooed, with a face that suggested violence was his first language. Not his last. He stared at me with open hostility, like I was an insult to his family just by existing. Vivian was beautiful. Polished, elegant, in the way that came from expensive schools and designer everything. Her smile was warm, her eyes were calculating, and I knew immediately she was the most dangerous person in this room. "So this is the bride," Lorenzo said, his voice gravelly with age but strong. "Selena Ruiz, sit. Let me look at you properly." I sat beside Easton, felt his hand find my knee under the table, a warning or reassurance, I wasn't sure which. "Tell me, Selena," Lorenzo continued, "how does a graphic designer with no family connections, no money, no prospects, end up married to my nephew?" "Luck," I said, meeting his eyes, refusing to look away. "Or lack of it, depending on your perspective." Marcus snorted. "She's a gold digger, old man. It's obvious she saw an opportunity and took it." "If I wanted gold," I said, turning to face him directly, "I'd have found someone less complicated than your brother. Someone who doesn't come with enemies and family politics and a target on my back. I'd have gone for a tech millionaire or a trust fund kid, someone safe, but I didn't, so maybe think about why that is before you decide you know my motives." Silence fell across the table, heavy, suffocating. Then Lorenzo laughed, a genuine bark of amusement. "She's got spine, I'll give her that." "She's got nerve," Vivian said, her smile sharpening. "But nerve without intelligence is just stupidity. Tell me, Selena, what do you bring to this family, besides decorative value? What makes you worthy of the Horton name?" "Nothing," I said flatly. "I don't bring money, or connections, or political influence. I bring exactly what Easton needed, a wife willing to sign a contract and play a role for 12 months. And I'm good at my job. I show up, I smile for cameras, I don't ask questions, and I don't cause problems. That's what makes me worthy. I know my place." "And what place is that?" Marcus challenged. "Because you're sitting at this table like you belong here, like you're one of us when everyone in this room knows you're temporary." "I'm sitting at this table because your brother put me here," I shot back. "And whether I'm temporary or not doesn't change the fact that right now in this moment, I'm his wife, and that means something in this family, doesn't it? Or did your father's will mean nothing?" Another silence. This one different, charged. "How much is he paying you?" Vivian asked, her tone conversational, like we were discussing the weather. "Surely a contract marriage comes with a price tag. What's your dignity worth these days?" "More than you'd pay and less than I'm worth." I met her eyes, refused to let her see how her words cut. "But that's between me and Easton, not family dinner conversation." "Everything is family conversation," Marcus growled, "especially when some nobody shows up wearing our name." "Then maybe you should take it up with your nephew," I suggested, "since he's the one who put a ring on my finger." Not me. I was just drunk enough and desperate enough to say yes. And before you judge that too harshly, ask yourself if you've never made a decision you regretted when circumstances backed you into a corner. I felt Easton tense beside me. Wasn't sure if I'd gone too far, but Lorenzo was smiling now, really smiling. You've got fire, girl. I wasn't sure when Easton first announced this marriage. Thought maybe he'd lost his mind. Picked some weak little thing who'd fold under pressure. But you held your ground. Didn't apologize, didn't grovel, didn't break. Because there's nothing to apologize for, I said. I'm here. I signed the contract. I'm doing what needs to be done. That's all any of you can ask. She'll do, Lorenzo announced, like it was a verdict handed down from on high. She's got the spine for this family, the intelligence to survive Vivian's games, and enough bite to keep Marcus in check. Welcome to the family. Selena, you've earned your seat at this table, at least for now. The rest of dinner passed in a blur of questions and tests and subtle verbal warfare. But something had shifted. Lorenzo treated me like I mattered. Vivian's attacks lost their edge. Even Marcus seemed grudgingly less hostile. And Easton beside me was quiet, watchful, his hand still on my knee, like he couldn't quite believe what he was seeing. The drive back was silent for the first 10 minutes before Easton finally spoke. You surprised me tonight. Good surprised or bad surprised. Dangerous surprised, he said, and there was something in his voice I couldn't identify. I expected you to survive. Maybe hold your own, but you didn't just survive. You won. Marcus respects you. Vivian sees you as a threat, not a joke, and Lorenzo gave you his blessing. That doesn't happen easily. Your family is terrifying. Yes, they are, and you stood up to all of them. He turned to look at me, the city lights sliding across his face. My father built this empire on fear and violence, but he always said the most dangerous weapon wasn't a gun or a threat, it was the ability to stand in a room full of predators and refuse to be prey. You did that tonight. I didn't have a choice. Everyone has a choice. You could have folded, could have cried, could have played weak and let them devour you, but you didn't. His hand found mine in the dark, our fingers intertwining. Why? Because, I said, meeting his eyes. I signed a contract and I don't break my promises, even when they're made drunk in a Vegas chapel, even when they're with someone who terrifies me, I keep my word. Something shifted in his expression. Something almost soft, almost vulnerable. So do I, he said quietly. I promise to keep you safe. And I will. Whatever else happens, whatever you think of me, that promise is real. Our hands stayed linked for the rest of the drive, and when we reached the penthouse, when we should have separated into our different wings, neither of us moved. Don't confuse this for something it's not, Easton said, finally pulling his hand away. Tonight doesn't change the contract, doesn't change what this is. I know, I said. But we both heard the lie. Later, alone in my studio, I sketched the dinner table, sketched the faces of people who'd tried to break me and failed, sketched Easton's expression when Lorenzo had welcomed me to the family, and I realized with something like fear that I was earning respect in a world I never wanted to enter, becoming someone I never intended to be. And the worst part was, I wasn't sure I wanted to stop. I was looking for a phone charger in Easton's office 2 weeks after the family dinner, when I found the folder tucked in his desk drawer, unmarked black leather, exactly like the contract folder that had changed my life. I shouldn't have opened it, knew I was crossing a boundary, but something made me flip it open. Maybe curiosity, maybe suspicion, maybe some instinct that told me I needed to see what was inside. Photographs spilled out onto the desk, dozens of them, and my blood turned to ice. There I was, at my favorite coffee shop, the one 3 blocks from my apartment, dated 6 weeks before the wedding. I was wearing my ratty NYU sweatshirt hunched over my laptop, probably working on a design that would never pay enough. Another photo of me leaving my apartment building, looking exhausted, defeated. Another at the grocery store, counting change to pay for ramen. Another outside Maya's office, clearly waiting to meet her for lunch. Photo after photo spanning weeks. All of me going about my normal life, completely unaware I was being watched, studied, analyzed like a lab specimen. The bachelorette party was there too, me in that borrowed red dress laughing with Maya's friends, looking happy for the first time in months. And there were notes in the margins: financially desperate, no family support system, isolated, malleable, like I was a target being assessed for vulnerability. My hands shook so badly the photos scattered across the desk, my vision blurred with rage and betrayal, and something that felt like violation because this wasn't chance. This wasn't wrong place, wrong time. This was calculated, predatory, planned. You weren't supposed to find those. Easton's voice came from the doorway, calm, controlled, like he'd been caught doing something mildly inappropriate instead of something that made my skin crawl. "You've been stalking me," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "For weeks, before that night, you've been watching me, following me, planning this." "I needed the right candidate," he said, stepping into the office, closing the door behind him like we were having a business discussion. "Someone who would be desperate enough to say yes, but strong enough to survive what came after. You fit the profile." "What profile?" I threw the photos at him, watched them flutter to the ground between us. "Desperate, broke, easy to manipulate. Is that what I was to you, a mark? Capable, resilient, someone who could survive this?" His voice didn't change, didn't apologize, didn't try to soften the blow. "I watched dozens of women." Selena went through files, backgrounds, financial records, looking for someone who needed the money badly enough to sign, but had enough spine to handle my family, to stand up to people like Castellano, to not break under pressure. "So you picked me like I was some kind of product." Fury burned in my chest, hot and choking. "You orchestrated everything that night, made sure I'd be there, made sure I'd be drunk enough, vulnerable enough, and I thought," my voice cracked, "I thought at least the meeting was real, at least that part wasn't manipulated, but nothing was real. Nothing was chance. You planned every second of this." I moved toward the door, needed to get out, needed air, needed space, needed anything but this room with him and his cold, calculated admission that I'd never had a choice, that I'd been a target from the beginning. He blocked the door, his presence overwhelming. "Where are you going?" "Away from you." I tried to push past him, but he didn't move. "Let me go, Easton. I can't be here right now." "You signed a contract." His voice dropped into something hard and absolute. 6 months down, 6 to go. You don't get to leave because you don't like how we started. You stalked me, you manipulated me, you took away my choice." "I gave you a choice," he said, and there was something almost like regret in his eyes. "Sign or don't. I didn't force you to put your name on that contract. I didn't force you to stay. You chose this, even if you didn't know all the factors, you still chose. That's not fair." "Life isn't fair, Selena. I needed a wife. You needed money. We both got what we needed. The method doesn't change the outcome." I wanted to scream, wanted to cry, wanted to do something other than stand there feeling like everything I thought I understood about this arrangement had just shifted beneath my feet. "I hate you," I whispered. "I know," he said softly. "But you're still my wife, and you're still staying 6 more months, remember?" He moved away from the door, left me standing there, surrounded by evidence of my own naivety, and I realized with sick certainty that I couldn't leave, wouldn't leave, because he was right. I'd signed the contract, and I needed that money more than I needed my pride. The art gallery opening 3 days later was supposed to be simple. Another public appearance, another performance of marital bliss, but I was still raw, still angry, still feeling like my skin didn't fit right after discovering those photos. Easton kept his distance, sensing maybe that I was one wrong word away from causing a scene that would destroy the careful illusion we'd built. I was studying a sculpture that probably cost more than my college education when someone appeared beside me. Older man, expensive suit, smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Mrs. Horton," he said, the title sounding like an insult. "Such a pleasure to finally meet you. I'm Richard Castellano." My stomach dropped. Castellano, like the man from the charity gala, like the family Easton had warned me about, like the people who saw me as leverage, enjoying the art, he continued when I didn't respond. "Your husband has exquisite taste in many things. though I have to wonder how long that taste will last. Marriage can be so unpredictable, can't it? Accidents happen, misunderstandings arise. Such a pretty wife would be a shame if something happened. The threat was barely disguised, wrapped in polite conversation and concern, but unmistakable in its intent. "Is that a threat?" I asked, keeping my voice level even though my heart was hammering. "Just an observation." His smile widened. "Vegas can be dangerous for people who don't understand the rules, who get caught in the middle of things that don't concern them. You seem like a smart girl, I'm sure you understand." Then Easton was there, the temperature dropping 10 degrees, his presence like a physical force. Castellano, his voice was quiet, deadly controlled rage. "I thought I made myself clear at the last event. My wife is off limits." "Just making conversation." Castellano's smile faltered. "Surely you're not so paranoid. Touch her, talk to her, even look at her wrong." Easton stepped closer, his voice dropping to something that made my blood run cold. "And I will end you, not quickly, not cleanly. I will take everything you have, everyone you love, and I will destroy it piece by piece until you beg me to kill you, and then I'll make you wait. Do we understand each other?" Castellano went pale, took a step back. "Crystal clear." "Good, now get the fuck out before I forget we're in public." I watched Castellano retreat, practically running, and felt Easton's hand on my arm, gentle but shaking. "Are you all right?" he asked. "Did he touch you? Did he hurt you?" "I'm fine," I said, looking up at him, seeing something in his face I'd never seen before. Actual fear, raw and uncontrolled. "Easton, your hands." He looked down at his trembling fingers, curled them into fists. "I can't," he said quietly. "I can't lose you to them. I can't let them use you to get to me." In the car afterward, the silence was suffocating until Easton reached over, touched my face with fingers that still shook slightly. "I don't lose what's mine," he said. "I'm not a possession," I said, but my voice lacked conviction. "No," he agreed. "You're more valuable than that." That night, I couldn't sleep, couldn't stop thinking about Castellano's threats, about Easton's fear, about photographs in a desk drawer, and manipulation that looked like fate. I went to the kitchen at 2 a.m., found the lights already on, and Easton standing at the counter making coffee, like he couldn't sleep either. "Can't shut your brain off?" he asked, not looking at me. "Something like that." He poured 2 cups, handed me one, and we stood there in unexpected domesticity, just 2 people awake in a sleeping city. "What did you want?" he asked, after a long silence. "Before all this, before the contract, what were your dreams?" "I wanted my own design firm," I said, surprised by the question. "Something small, boutique, high-end clients' work that mattered instead of whatever paid the bills you." "I wanted to be an architect," he said, and smiled at my expression. "I was going to design buildings, change skylines." My father had other plans, said. Architecture was for people who didn't understand power, that the Horton family built empires, not buildings. "Do you regret it?" "Every day." We talked for an hour about dreams that died and choices that weren't really choices, about the weight of family expectations and the cost of survival. And somewhere in that conversation, I forgot to be angry, forgot about the photographs, forgot that this was supposed to be fake. "I should go to bed," I said finally, but neither of us moved. "Selena." He said my name softly, almost carefully. "Don't," I whispered, because I could see it in his eyes, the same dangerous pull I was feeling. "This can't happen." "No," he agreed. "It can't." But neither of us moved, and the space between us felt charged, electric, like something inevitable was building, and we were both too scared to acknowledge it. "6 more months," I said, finally stepping back. "That's all this is." "6 more months," he echoed. But we both heard the lie. I went back to my wing, left him standing in the kitchen, and knew with absolute certainty that something had shifted between us. Something that had nothing to do with contracts or arrangements or careful plans, something dangerous and real and completely terrifying. 3 days after that kitchen conversation, I broke protocol for the first time since signing the contract. Easton's car was waiting downstairs. The usual morning routine, driver ready, security checked, but I wanted real coffee from the place 3 blocks away, the one that knew my order, the one that felt like the life I used to have. "I'm coming with you," I announced, appearing in the living room where Easton was reviewing something on his tablet. He looked up, surprised. "You don't need to. I'll be back in 20 minutes. I want coffee from Stella's, the real stuff, not whatever Rosa makes." Something flickered in his expression, almost like amusement. "All right, but we follow protocol. You stay close, you listen to Marcus. No wandering off." We took the elevator down, emerged into the underground garage where his black Mercedes was waiting, engine already running, Marcus at the wheel, another security guard in the passenger seat, the whole operation smooth and practiced, like every morning for the past 6 months. I slid into the back seat, Easton followed, and the door closed with that heavy, expensive sound that meant safety, meant protection, meant nothing could touch us. The engine revved, Marcus shifted into gear, and that's when Easton's whole body went rigid. "Get out!" he screamed, grabbing me, yanking me toward the door. "Now get out!" He hit the door release, tackled me out of the car. We hit the concrete hard, his body covering mine, and the world exploded. The sound was deafening, a physical force that slammed into us. Heat and pressure and flying metal. The Mercedes erupted in a fireball that turned the underground garage into an inferno. I couldn't hear, couldn't breathe, couldn't process what was happening. Just felt Easton's weight crushing me, protecting me. His arms locked around my head. Shrapnel rained down, tearing into his jacket. His back. I felt him flinch, felt something warm and wet soaking through his shirt onto my hands, and realized with dawning horror that he was bleeding, that he'd used his body as a shield, that he'd taken the blast meant for both of us. "Easton," I tried to say, but couldn't hear my own voice, ears ringing from the explosion. Security mobilized from everywhere, armed men surrounding us, shouting into radios. Marcus staggered out of the wreckage, blood streaming down his face. The passenger guard wasn't moving, and I knew with sick certainty he was dead. Paramedics arrived, sirens screaming. Someone tried to pull Easton off me, but he wouldn't move. "Are you hurt?" he was saying over and over, his hands on my face, my arms checking for injuries. "Selena, answer me. Are you hurt? Did anything hit you?" "I'm fine." I managed, my voice sounding distant underwater. "I'm fine. You're bleeding. You need to." "I don't give a fuck about me," he cut me off. His eyes, wild, desperate. "Are you hurt?" "No." Only then did he let the paramedics pull him away, let them check the shrapnel wounds in his back, his shoulder blood soaking through his white shirt, turning it crimson. I watched them work. Watched Easton refuse pain medication, refuse to lie down, refuse anything until he could see me, until he knew for certain I wasn't hurt. "Mr. Horton, you need to go to the hospital," one of the paramedics insisted. "These wounds need proper treatment." "Fine," he said, his eyes never leaving mine, "but she comes with me." The hospital was chaos, media already gathering outside because explosions involving the Horton family made headlines. Easton was rushed into treatment. I was checked over and released with nothing but bruises and ringing ears that would fade. I should have gone home, should have let security take me back to the penthouse, but I couldn't leave, couldn't stop seeing that moment when he'd tackled me, when he'd chosen to take the blast instead of saving himself. I found him in a private room, doctors finishing up the last of his stitches. His back was torn up. Shrapnel wounds that would scar, that would serve as permanent reminders that he'd nearly died protecting me. "You should have left," I said from the doorway. "When you felt something was wrong, you should have run." "And leave you in that car," he said like the suggestion was absurd. "Not a fucking chance." The doctors finished, left us alone, and the silence was suffocating. When did that change? I asked quietly. When did I become someone worth dying for? I don't know, he said, and for once he wasn't hiding behind control or contracts or careful distance. But somewhere between the family dinner and the kitchen at 2 a.m., you stopped being a contract and started being mine. Not in the possessive way, not in the arrangement way, but mine in the way that means I'd burn the world down before I let someone hurt you. I crossed the room, sat on the edge of his bed, my hand finding his. I didn't want you to die, I said, the admission feeling like surrender. When that car exploded, when I felt you covering me, I didn't think about the contract or the money or any of it. I just thought, please don't let him die, and I don't know when that happened either. His hand tightened on mine, grip desperate, like he was afraid I'd disappear. When I saw that bomb, when my training kicked in, and I knew what was about to happen, all I could think was getting you clear. Didn't think about myself, about the guards, about anything but you. I can't lose you. Selena, contract or not, I can't lose you. You're not going to, I whispered. The Castellanos did this. His voice dropped into something cold and lethal. They went after you. They tried to kill you. This is war now. Easton. No, he pulled me closer, his forehead resting against mine. No more half measures, no more warnings. I'm going to end them. I'm going to destroy everything they have, everyone they love, and I'm going to make sure they know why. I should have been horrified, should have been terrified of the violence in his voice, the absolute certainty that he would follow through. But all I felt was safe, protected, like this dangerous man would actually burn the world for me. The kiss happened without thought, without planning. Just his hand on my face, pulling me in, and my mouth on his, tasting ash and fear and something desperate and real. His hands were gentle despite the rage in his voice, despite the violence simmering beneath his skin, and I kissed him back. Poured everything I couldn't say into that moment. All the fear and relief and confusion about when this stopped being an arrangement and started being something that felt dangerously close to real. When we pulled apart, both breathing hard, both shaking, he said, "This changes everything." I know. The contract. Fuck the contract, I said, and watched his eyes widen. I don't care about the contract anymore. I care about you, and I don't know when that happened, but it did, and we can't undo it. That night, back at the penthouse, I watched Easton mobilize his organization, transform from the man who'd held me in that hospital room into the Mafia boss. Everyone feared he made calls, issued orders, his voice cold and strategic, and absolutely merciless. Find every Castellano operation in this city, every business, every safe house, every person who works for them, and burn it down. I want them to know what it costs to come after what's mine. I should have been horrified by the violence, by the casual way he ordered destruction, but instead I felt protected, safe, like I was standing behind a shield that nothing could penetrate. That night, neither of us maintained separate bedrooms. Neither of us pretended this was still just a contract. I ended up in his bed, not because of desire or obligation, but because neither of us wanted to be alone, because we'd both nearly died and needed the proof that we were still here, still breathing, still alive. I never wanted this life for anyone I cared about, Easton said in the darkness, his arms around me, his chin resting on my head. Never wanted to put someone in danger, never wanted to make someone a target, but I do care about you, and that makes you the most vulnerable person in my world. I know, I said, my hand over his heart, feeling it beat steady and strong. But I'm not leaving, I'm not running, I'm choosing this, choosing you even knowing what it costs. Why? Because somewhere between that Vegas chapel and tonight, I fell for you, the real you, not the Mafia boss, not the contract, not the performance, but the man who makes coffee at 2 a.m. and wanted to be an architect and uses his body as a shield without hesitation. I fell for him, and I can't unfeel it. His arms tightened around me. I care about you too, he said quietly. More than the contract, more than the business, more than anything, and that terrifies me. We fell asleep, tangled together, the lines between arrangement and reality, completely blurred, and when I woke up in his arms the next morning, I knew with absolute certainty that this wasn't a contract anymore. This was something real and dangerous and completely irreversible. 2 weeks passed, and something that looked like happiness felt like safety, tasted like the life I'd never thought I'd have. We shared meals, talked, until late night, fell asleep, tangled together, and woke up the same way. Easton taught me about his business. The legitimate parts showed me architectural drawings he'd made as a teenager, dreams he'd abandoned. I showed him my design portfolio, the projects I was proud of, the ones that never paid enough, and somewhere in those 2 weeks I stopped thinking about the contract, stopped counting down months, stopped treating this like an arrangement that would end. I felt happy for the first time since signing that contract. Felt safe in a way I'd never felt before. And that should have been my first warning that something was wrong. Because happiness in Easton Horton's world always came with a price. I was in his office looking for a phone charger. Mine had died, and I'd remembered seeing extras in his desk drawer, the same drawer where I'd found those surveillance photos weeks ago. But this time I wasn't looking for secrets, wasn't trying to uncover anything. I was just looking for a charger, just existing in the space we now shared. The file was tucked behind the chargers, black leather unmarked exactly like the others, and my hand hesitated, remembering last time. Remembering how finding those photos had shattered my illusions. But I was different now. We were different now. We'd moved past manipulation and calculation into something real. I opened it. The first page was titled, Operation Castellano Response, with dates and objectives laid out in brutal detail. I scanned it once, not understanding, then read it again slower, as my blood turned to ice. Primary objective: eliminate Castellano. Lieutenant Marco, establish clear message regarding threats to family. Secondary objective: test subjects' loyalty under extreme duress. Tertiary objective: justify expanded operations against Castellano interests. Test subject. That's what I was, a subject being tested. I flipped through the pages, found detailed plans for the car bomb placement, timing, expected blast radius, probability of survival, minimal risk to primary targets, maximum psychological impact. There were contingency plans, backup scenarios, risk assessments, treating the explosion that nearly killed us like a business transaction, like a calculated move in some game. I didn't know we were playing. Mission objectives achieved. Castellano lieutenant eliminated, subject remained loyal under pressure. Justification for war established, expanded operations approved. The protection, the fear, the desperate kiss in that hospital room, the way he'd held me that night, whispering that he cared about me. All of it was calculation. All of it was planned. I was bait, and I'd never even known. My hands shook so badly the papers scattered across the desk. Evidence of my own stupidity, of how easily I'd been manipulated again, how I'd let myself believe this was real when nothing with Easton Horton was ever real. You weren't supposed to see that. His voice came from the doorway, calm, controlled, and I wanted to scream. You used me, I said, turning to face him, holding up the file like evidence in a trial. That bomb wasn't Castellano. It was you. You orchestrated the whole thing. It served multiple purposes, he said, stepping into the office, and I noticed he didn't deny. It didn't try to lie. Didn't even look apologetic. The Castellanos needed a message. You needed to understand the reality of this life, and I needed to know if you'd run or stay when things got dangerous. I could have died. My voice cracked, broke. That guard did die. Marcus was injured. I was terrified, and you held me. You kissed me. You made me believe. I would never let you die, he interrupted. I had control of every variable, every factor. I knew exactly when to get you out. I calculated the blast radius, the timing, everything. You were never in real danger. That's not the point, I screamed. You manipulated me again. You used me as bait. You tested me like I was some kind of experiment, and I fell for it. I believed you when you said you cared. I believed this was real. I do care. Something flickered in his expression. That part wasn't. Don't. I cut him off. Don't you dare tell me any of that was real. When you planned it all. When you orchestrated my fear, my trauma, my feelings like they were just another variable in your equation. I needed to know. His voice hardened, dropped into that cold logic that made me want to break something. Needed to know if you'd stay. When you saw real violence, real danger. Needed to know if you could handle this life, or if you'd run the first time things got difficult. Now I know you're stronger than I thought. More loyal, you passed. Passed what a test I didn't know I was taking. Yes, and the Castellanos, he continued, like we were discussing the weather. Marco is dead, his operations are dismantled, his people are scattered, problem solved, 2 birds, 1 stone. I stared at him. At this man, I'd started to love and saw him clearly for the first time, saw the ruthless, calculating monster beneath the rare smiles and vulnerable moments, saw someone capable of anything who would use anyone to get what he wanted. I was starting to love you, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. I was falling for you, believing this was becoming something real, but you're a monster. You're exactly what everyone warned me you were. Something flickered in his eyes, something that looked almost like pain. Yes, he said quietly, I am. I told you that from the beginning, told you I was good at making problems disappear. You just chose not to believe me. I'm leaving, I said, pushing past him toward the door. I'm done, contract or not, I'm done. I made it to my room, started throwing clothes into a suitcase, my hands shaking, my vision blurred with tears. I'd been so stupid, so naive, thinking this could be real. Thinking a man like Easton Horton could actually care about someone without it being part of some larger plan. He appeared in my doorway, blocking my exit. Where do you think you're going? Away from you, anywhere that's not here. You signed a contract. His voice was cold. The vulnerable man from 2 weeks ago, completely gone. Replaced by the Mafia boss who'd orchestrated a car bombing to test my loyalty. 12 months? We're only 7 months in. You don't get to leave. I don't care about the money anymore, I said, zipping the suitcase. Keep it, all of it, I just want out. You should care about the money, he said, stepping into the room, his presence overwhelming. You'll need it for the legal battle when I sue you for breach of contract, for defamation, for everything I can think of. You'll need every penny. His face was a mask, cold hard, the man who'd held me in the darkness completely erased. You can't leave, I won't allow it. You can't keep me prisoner. Can't I? He pulled out his phone, pressed something, and I heard the lock on my door click shut. You're my wife. Selena, contract or not, you're mine, and I don't let go of what's mine, not when they're trying to leave, not when they think they can walk away, not ever. The obsession in his voice made my skin crawl, made me realize I'd never really known him at all. This isn't love, this is possession. Maybe, he said, but it's what you signed up for, what you agreed to. When you put your name on that contract, you wanted to know what you were worth, $250,000 and 12 months of your life, that's the price. I hate you. I know, he said, and there was something broken in his voice, something that might have been regret if he was capable of such things. But you're still staying, and in 5 months when this contract is up, when you're free to leave, I'll let you go. But not before then, not when you're angry. Not when you think you understand what I am, because you don't understand Selena. You see the monster, but you don't see the necessity. You don't see what it costs to keep you safe. I don't want your protection if it comes with manipulation. Too bad, he said, turning toward the door, because you're getting it whether you want it or not. 5 more months, then you're free, but until then, you're mine and you'll stay here where I can keep you alive. The door closed behind him. The lock clicked, and I was left alone in a room that had felt like safety yesterday and felt like a prison today, staring at a suitcase. I couldn't take anywhere, realizing I'd fallen in love with a man who saw me as nothing more than a test, a variable, a problem to be managed. And the worst part, the absolutely worst part, was that some small, traitorous part of me still wanted him. Still remembered how he'd covered my body with his during that explosion, still heard his voice saying he cared, and wondered desperately if any of it had been real, or if I'd just imagined the humanity in a monster who'd warned me from the beginning, exactly what he was. 3 weeks of silence, 3 weeks of existing in the same space but living in different worlds, 3 weeks of Easton watching me like I might disappear if he blinked, watching me like I was something precious and breakable instead of the prisoner he'd made me. He kept me close, controlled, monitored but never violent, never cruel, just suffocatingly present, always there, always watching, always making sure I couldn't run. I spoke to him only when necessary. Yes, no. I don't know. Short answers that couldn't be twisted into conversation, couldn't be used to manipulate me again. I ate meals in my room, worked in my studio, stayed as far from him as possible in a penthouse that suddenly felt too small. "This has to stop," he said one night, appearing in my studio doorway for the 10th time that week. "We need to talk about what happened." "No, we don't. Selena, I was trying to protect you. Everything I do is to protect what's mine. I'm not a possession," I said, not looking up from my work. "I'm not something you own." "No," he said quietly. "You're my wife, my responsibility, my everything, and that terrifies me more than any rival family, more than any threat, because if something happens to you, if I lose you—" He stopped, couldn't finish, and that admission, that vulnerability, should have softened me, should have reminded me of the man I'd fallen for. But all I felt was rage because he'd destroyed any trust I had that his vulnerability was real. "You manipulated me," I said, finally looking at him. "You used me as bait. You tested my loyalty like I was an employee, not someone you claimed to care about. How am I supposed to forgive that?" "I don't know," he said, "but I'm asking you to try." "I can't." I turned back to my work. "Not yet, maybe not ever." He left without another word, and I told myself I didn't care. Told myself the pain in his voice wasn't real, wasn't something that made my chest ache. The security breach happened during shift change, 3 a.m., when guards were rotating, when the building was most vulnerable. I woke to a hand over my mouth. Chemical sweet smell of chloroform making my head spin. My vision blur. I tried to fight, tried to scream, but the drug was fast and efficient, and the last thing I saw before darkness took me was unfamiliar faces in tactical gear and the sick knowledge that Easton's enemies had found a way in. I woke in a warehouse, concrete floors, rusted metal walls, the smell of oil and decay, voices speaking in low tones about leverage and territory, and how much the Horton prince would pay to get his precious wife back. "She's awake," someone said, and a man appeared, older, well-dressed, the kind of person who ordered violence instead of committing it. "Mrs. Horton, welcome. I'm afraid you'll be our guest for a while." "Castellano," I said, my voice rough from the drugs. "Very good. Your husband has caused me considerable trouble in recent weeks, destroyed my operations, killed my people, all because of you. So now we're going to see exactly how much you're worth." They didn't hurt me, physically, didn't need to. The psychological torture was enough. 3 days in that warehouse listening to them discuss how they'd use me, what they'd demand, what they'd do if Easton didn't comply. 3 days of wondering if he'd come, if he'd pay their price. If I was actually worth what they were asking. "He'll give us anything for you," one of the guards said, laughing. "We've had eyes on him for days. He's losing his mind, tearing the city apart, looking for you, burning our operations, killing anyone who might know where you are." "Easton doesn't care about me," I said, but even I didn't believe it anymore. "Oh, he cares, sweetheart. He cares so much it's making him stupid, making him reckless. We've never seen him like this, and we've been watching the Horton family for 20 years. Across the city, I learned later, Easton was becoming something none of them had seen before. Unleashed, uncontrolled, absolutely merciless, Vivian told me afterward, tried to explain what happened while I was gone. "I've never seen him like that," she said, her usual composure cracked. "He stopped pretending to be civilized, stopped playing by any rules, burned every Castellano operation in the city, every business, every safe house, every connection they had." Marcus had watched in something like awe as his brother personally executed 3 Castellano lieutenants. No hesitation, no remorse, just cold, efficient violence. "Return her, or I'll kill every last one of you," Easton had said, and they'd laughed until he started proving it wasn't a threat but a promise. The rescue came on the third night. I heard gunfire outside the warehouse screaming that cut off abruptly, then silence. That was somehow more terrifying. The guards around me panicked, grabbed weapons, took positions, but they were amateurs compared to what was coming for them. The door exploded inward and Easton stood there covered in blood. His clothes soaked his hands, dripping his face spattered with red. None of it, his, I knew immediately. None of it belonged to him. It all came from the people who'd taken me from the path he'd carved through them to get here. The last guard raised his gun. Easton moved faster, caught his wrist twisted until bones snapped. Then his hands were around the guard's throat, squeezing. No weapon, no distance, just brutal, intimate violence. And I watched, unable to look away as the life drained from the guard's eyes, as Easton killed him, without hesitation, without mercy. The body dropped. Easton's eyes found mine. "Are you hurt?" His voice was raw, desperate. "Selena, are you hurt? Did they touch you?" I tried to speak. Couldn't form words because this was the monster everyone warned me about. This was the ruthless, calculating killer beneath the careful control, and I recoiled instinctively, moved back and watched something break in his expression. "Don't," he said, his voice cracking. "Don't look at me like that, please." "You're a monster," I whispered. "Yes," he said, stepping closer, his bloodied hands reaching for me. "But I'm your monster, and I'll burn the world for you. I did burn the world for you. 3 days, Selena, 3 days of destroying everything they had, everyone they loved, until they had nothing left to bargain with, nothing left but you." He pulled me into his arms, blood soaking into my clothes, into my skin, and I should have fought, should have pushed him away, but I couldn't, because despite everything, despite the manipulation and the lies and the violence, I'd been terrified I'd die in that warehouse and he wouldn't come, and now he was here covered in evidence of what he'd done to get me back. "I've got you," he murmured against my hair. "I've got you. You're safe now." He carried me out of that warehouse through carnage he'd created, past bodies of people who'd taken me, past the ruins of an organization he'd destroyed in 3 days. And I was silent. Couldn't process what I was seeing. Couldn't reconcile the man holding me so gently with the monster who'd killed without hesitation. Everything was broken. The trust, the hope, the possibility that this could be anything but toxic and dangerous and doomed. But his arms around me felt like safety, even covered in blood, even knowing what he was capable of. And I didn't know whether that made me complicit or just desperate for something to hold on to in a world that had become nothing but violence and fear. "I'm sorry," he said in the car, his voice raw. "I'm sorry I couldn't protect you. I'm sorry they got to you. I'm sorry." "Don't," I said, because I couldn't handle his apologies, couldn't handle his guilt when I was still trying to process that he'd become something inhuman to get me back. "Just take me home." Home. I'd called his penthouse home, and didn't even notice until the word was already out, and we both heard it hanging in the air between us, heavy with implications neither of us could face. Back at the penthouse. Rosa cleaned the blood from my skin, helped me into fresh clothes, brought tea I couldn't drink while Easton showered, washing away evidence of what he'd done to save me. I sat in the living room, staring at the Vegas skyline, and made a decision that felt like dying. He emerged. 20 minutes later, clean-dressed, the monster hidden beneath expensive clothes and careful control. "Selena," he started, but I held up my hand. "I can't do this," I said, my voice steady, despite everything inside me breaking. "I can't love someone who destroys people without hesitation, who becomes something inhuman the moment someone threatens what's his. I did it for you," he said. "Everything I did to get you back." "No," I faced him. "You did it for yourself because you can't stand losing, because something you consider yours was taken, and that wounded your pride, your control. You didn't burn down the Castellanos for me. You did it because they dared to challenge you." "That's not true." "Isn't it?" I asked. Be honest, Easton, was it about saving me, or was it about proving that no one takes from you and survives? He couldn't answer, and that silence told me everything. I love you, I said, and watched his eyes widen. I fell for you despite everything, despite the manipulation and the contracts and the lies. I fell for the man who makes coffee at 2 a.m., who wanted to be an architect, who held me like I mattered, but I can't watch you become worse because of me, can't be the reason you turn into something more monstrous, can't live knowing that loving me makes you more violent, more ruthless, more lost. What are you saying? I'm leaving. I said, contract or not, I'm done. I can't do this anymore. Can't be in this world. Can't watch you destroy yourself to protect me. For a long moment, he just stared at me. Then something shifted in his expression. Resignation, maybe? Or understanding? If that's what you want, he said quietly. I won't stop you. Won't hunt you. Won't make this harder than it already is. You want to leave, then leave. Just like that. Just like that. But his voice cracked slightly. But Selena, I won't sign the divorce papers. You'll still be my wife, legally bound to me. And if you ever need anything, if you're ever in danger, if you ever want to come back, the door will be open. I left that night, took only what I'd brought with me, left behind the designer clothes, the jewelry, the ring that had started everything. Rosa cried. Marcus looked away, and Easton stood by the window where I'd first seen him 7 months ago, watching me leave with an expression that looked like devastation. Portland was rain and coffee and starting over. I rented a studio apartment, opened my design business, took clients who actually appreciated my work, built something that was mine, that had nothing to do with contracts or mafia politics or dangerous men who loved violently. 6 months passed. I dated, went out with a software developer who was kind and boring, went out with a teacher who was sweet and forgettable, went out with an architect, which lasted 2 weeks before I realized I was looking for Easton in everyone and finding no one who came close. Every night I slept alone in a bed that felt too empty, thought about tattooed hands and steel eyes and a voice whispering that I was his. Everything. Every morning I woke up and chose to stay. Chose the safe, boring life over the dangerous love I'd left behind. But I knew he was watching. Knew his people kept tabs on me because flowers appeared on my doorstep. When I had bad days, clients mysteriously found me when money was tight. Small gifts that screamed Easton. Horton is still protecting you from a distance. I missed him. Missed the real him, the vulnerable man behind the monster, missed the way he looked at me like I was something precious, missed conversations at 2 a.m., and the feeling of being completely seen by someone who understood darkness. The call came at 3 in the morning, 6 months to the day after I'd left Vivian's number flashing on my screen. He's been shot, she said without preamble. 3 times ambush outside one of the casinos, Castellano's final revenge. They got him, Selena, and he's asking for you. My heart stopped. Is he? He's alive for now, but he won't let them operate until you get here. He keeps saying your name, saying he needs to see you. If you ever gave a damn about my brother, you'll come now. I was on a flight within 2 hours. Didn't pack. Didn't think. Just grabbed my wallet and phone and ran my heart in my throat. Terror making it hard to breathe, because he couldn't die. Not like this. Not before I could tell him. The hospital was chaos. Media camped outside, family in the waiting room. Marcus stood when he saw me, nodded once. He's been asking for you, wouldn't shut up about it even when he could barely breathe. Vivian looked relieved. Thank God you came. I wasn't sure you would after everything. Where is he? I see you. They've been waiting to operate. He refused until you got here. I ran down hallways following a nurse to a room full of machines and tubes, and Easton pale as death with wires and monitors, and 3 gunshot wounds that were killing him. His eyes opened when I entered, focused on me with desperate intensity. Selena. Barely a whisper, barely breath. I'm here, I said, grabbing his hand, tears streaming down my face. I'm here. You can let them operate now, you can. Had to see you, he said. Had to tell you I was wrong about everything. The manipulation, the control, the way I loved you like you were something to possess instead of someone to cherish. I was wrong to let you go wrong, to think I could survive without you. Stop talking, save your strength. Never stopped being my wife, he said. Never stopped loving you, never stopped hoping you'd come back. I never stopped being your wife, I said through tears. I was just scared. Scared of what loving you would cost. Scared. I'd lose myself in your world. But I never stopped loving you, Easton. I tried. I couldn't. Then don't leave again, he whispered. Choose me. Choose this. Choose us. I'll do better, be better. I'll transition the business, go legitimate. Whatever you need, just don't leave me again. I'm not going anywhere, I said, leaning down to kiss him, tasting salt tears and antiseptic and fear. I choose you, monster, and all I choose this, I choose us. The surgery took 6 hours. I sat with his family in the waiting room, Marcus telling stories about their childhood, Vivian admitting she'd never seen her brother care about anything the way he cared about me. And when the surgeon finally emerged, saying he'd survived, saying he'd recover, I broke down completely. He woke up 2 days later, found me asleep in a chair beside his bed, my hand in his. You stayed, he said. I told you I wasn't going anywhere. 18 months later. I stood beside Easton at a private vow renewal ceremony. No Elvis impersonator this time, no tacky Vegas chapel, just us and a judge and the family who'd grudgingly become mine. Sophia slept in Vivian's arms 3 months old, with my eyes and Easton's stubborn jaw. The original ring sat in a safe in our penthouse, reminder of where we started, of the worst beginning that became something real. Easton had transitioned, most of the business gone, legitimate, kept only what was necessary, and learned to love without violence, to protect without destroying. Late that night, Sophia asleep in her nursery, we stood in the kitchen where we'd first crossed that dangerous line. Best decision I ever made, Easton said, pulling me close. Manipulating a drunk woman into marrying me. Worst beginning to a relationship in history, I said, laughing. But the best ending, he murmured, and kissed me. I kissed him back, tasting home and safety and love that had survived manipulation and violence and separation. Later I sketched our family, Easton watching with that rare, genuine smile that he showed only to me. And I realized that the woman who'd woken up wearing a stranger's ring had become the only person alive who could look Easton Horton in the eye and make the most feared man in Nevada kneel. Sometimes the worst beginnings, the ones built on lies and contracts and desperation, become the most unbreakable bonds. And sometimes love means choosing the monster, knowing exactly what he's capable of, and loving him anyway, not despite his darkness, but because you've seen it and chosen to stay. Thank you for staying with me till the very end of this story. Every view, every comment, every moment you spend here keeps these stories alive. If you felt this one, make sure to subscribe and let me know you watched to the end.